I don't know how they did it. All I know is they did it. I don't think anybody knows how they did it, how they lifted those stones, how they brought them up to that level. I think we're looking, again, at a lost technology.
Beneath the sands of Egypt, there's something that defies everything we think we know about ancient history, the Osirion. Massive 100-ton stone blocks perfectly fit together without mortar, and an advanced water system flows through it, in the middle of the desert. But here's the twist. Some believe this mysterious site could be far older than Egypt itself. No hieroglyphs, no typical Egyptian design, just questions. Could this be the work of a forgotten civilization? Stick around, this is about to get fascinating.
Here we are at the Osirion, possibly one of the most impressive sites in Egypt, possibly the world. This is officially dated to the time of Seti I, which would have been completely roofed over, thousands of tons of stone in this whole construction, and it really is something to behold.
Introducing Osirion. Hidden deep in the sands of Abydos lies a structure that throws everything you know about ancient Egyptian engineering into question. This is the Osirion, a site that some say simply shouldn't exist. Not in Egypt, at least. But here's the crazy part. This structure didn't just come with massive stone blocks. It came with something even more bizarre. A water system. Imagine, in the middle of the desert, a site that's constantly fed by water from an unknown source. And we're not talking about a little stream trickling through the sand. This is a full-blown hydraulic system, something you'd expect to see in modern construction, not in a tomb from thousands of years ago. Why is there water? And more importantly, where is it coming from? If the Osirion was meant to be a tomb, why would it have an intricate water feature that seems to defy the basic understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities? So, how did they do it? Was the Osirion simply the product of Seti I's reign? Or is there something older, something far more mysterious at play here? What we're about to dive into is not your average archaeological find. The Osirion has led some to speculate about advanced technologies, forgotten civilizations, and secrets hidden beneath the sands. And when you find out why people think this site shouldn't even exist in Egypt, you'll be questioning everything you know about history. The reign of Seti I and the official story. Let's start with the official narrative. The Osirion, located behind the Grand Temple of Seti I in Abydos, is traditionally dated to Seti I's reign around 1294 to 1279 BCE, during the New Kingdom period of ancient Egypt. Seti I was a prolific builder, and his reign is known for its grand construction projects, including temples and monumental tombs. Officially, the Osirion is considered part of his funeral complex, perhaps built to resemble tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The Egypt Exploration Society has documented the presence of Seti I's cartouches, which suggests that he was involved in its construction. But this is where it gets wild. While many researchers agree that the Osirion was built during Seti's reign, others argue that this place might not even belong to his era. Think about that. We might be looking at something way older than the pyramids, and when you look closely at its design, it's easy to see why. The Osirion is a stark contrast to the temples and tombs of the New Kingdom. Instead of the usual hieroglyphs and detailed carvings, you have massive stone blocks that look like they were moved by giants. Some of these blocks are so precisely cut and placed that it's almost impossible to believe they were crafted using the tools available in Seti I's time. It's why researchers often compare it to the 4th Dynasty Valley Temple at Giza, which dates back more than 1,000 years earlier. Could Seti really have built something like this? Or is it possible that he found it, claimed it, and history just gave him the credit? Ancient Greek historian Strabo, who visited the site in the 1st century BCE, suggested that it might have been constructed by a much older figure, Amenemhet III, the same person credited with building the famous labyrinth at Hawara. Now hold on. If Strabo thought the Osirion was ancient back then, that means this structure might be far older than we've ever realized. Modern excavators later named the subterranean water basin Strabo's Well after his description of the underground water source. Adding to the puzzle, the Osirion's architecture doesn't fit the standard model of Egyptian temples. It lacks the ornate decorations and hieroglyphs typical of the New Kingdom. Instead, what we see is more like the megalithic structures found in places like Peru massive, geometric and precise in a way that doesn't match up with the tools supposedly available to ancient Egyptians? Could the Assyrian be part of a lost legacy of ancient builders? It's not a question many historians want to touch, but when you're faced with a structure that doesn't make sense, you start to wonder who or what was behind its construction. And if the Osirion does indeed predate Seti I, we could be looking at evidence of advanced engineering in Egypt long before anyone ever imagined. So we know Seti I was all about making a statement, but what's the deal with his obsession with massive building projects? Well, Seti I wasn't just any pharaoh, he was a king on a mission to leave a legacy. In fact, during his reign, Egypt saw some of the most awe-inspiring construction feats the world had ever witnessed. One of the most famous? The hyper-style hall at Karnak, a sprawling hall filled with towering columns that still stands today as a symbol of his reign. But the Osirion? It stands out as something even more mysterious. If Seti I was responsible for its construction, he certainly didn't follow the same playbook he used with his other projects. The Osirion lacks the grand inscriptions, elaborate carvings, and the typically Egyptian artistic flourishes you'd expect from his reign. Instead, it's stark, precise, and feels more like a megalithic structure, hinting that something very different may have been going on here. But why water? Well, it ties back to Osiris, the god of the underworld and rebirth, a deity who was deeply linked to water. Water represented life and the cycle of death and resurrection in Egyptian mythology, making it a powerful element for a pharaoh like Seti to incorporate into a temple supposedly linked to his legacy. Did Seti envision this structure as a connection between himself and Osiris, using water to symbolize eternal life? If so, this could explain why water flows endlessly through a tomb buried deep in the desert. The Osiris connection. Seti I's connection to the Osiris cult wasn't just religious, it was also political. Associating himself with one of the most powerful gods in the Egyptian pantheon was a smart move to solidify his status and that of his dynasty. By building something as unique as the Osirion, he was linking his reign to something eternal, both in terms of life after death and a legacy that would outlast even the desert sands. Here's the twist: if Seti didn't build the Osirion and only claimed it as part of his legacy, what does that mean for his other projects? Was he simply a master at taking over existing monuments, or did he truly envision something as monumental as the Osirion? The answer is still up for debate, but one thing's for sure: the Osirion doesn't fit into the same category as Seti's other grand projects, leaving us to wonder whether he built it, found it, or was trying to hide something even bigger. The megalithic blocks. Alright, let's talk about the real showstopper here, those massive megalithic blocks. We're not talking about the kind of stones you'd see in any regular temple or tomb in Egypt. The Osirion's central hall is constructed with enormous stone blocks, some of which weigh upwards of 100 tons. Yes, you heard that right, 100 tons. And that's not even the most shocking part. These blocks are so precisely cut and fitted together that modern engineers are left scratching their heads. And here's the kicker: no mortar was used. The blocks are so well aligned that not even a razor blade can fit between them. This kind of precision, without the use of advanced machinery, is practically unheard of for the time. It's the same level of craftsmanship seen in the Valley Temple of Giza, which is why many experts argue that the Osirion might be far older than the reign of Seti I. Now let's take a moment to really appreciate the logistics of what we're looking at here. Moving a 100-ton block today would require modern cranes and machinery. But ancient Egyptians, according to mainstream history, would have had nothing more than ropes, wooden sleds, and manpower. So how on earth did they move these colossal stones into place, let alone carve and fit them so perfectly? Some theorists suggest the use of advanced technology, or even the involvement of a forgotten civilization with knowledge of stonework far beyond what we typically associate with ancient Egypt. Others argue for more practical explanations, like ramps and levers, but there's no definitive answer. The real question is, where else do we see this? The design of the Osirion doesn't match typical Egyptian temples, but it does bear a striking resemblance to megalithic structures found across the world. Sites like Machu Picchu in Peru or the temple complexes at Pumapunku in Bolivia feature the same precise stone-cutting techniques, tight joints, and polygonal masonry. Could there be a connection? Some researchers believe that the similarities point to a shared knowledge among ancient civilizations, knowledge that has been lost over time. Is it possible that the builders of the Osirion were part of a global network of megalithic construction? Or perhaps they were using techniques passed down from an earlier, advanced society? We may never know for sure, but one thing's clear: the Osirion's construction stands in direct contrast to the other buildings of its time. Its existence raises more questions than answers about the true capabilities of the ancient Egyptians, or whoever may have come before them. And here's the real mystery: no inscriptions or carvings were left behind to explain who built it or why. This lack of decoration is incredibly rare for Egyptian structures, which are usually adorned with detailed hieroglyphs and artwork. It's almost as if the Osirion was built for a purpose that went beyond mere burial, something more functional or symbolic, yet completely hidden from view. The hydraulic mystery: advanced water management. Here's where things get really strange. Water. Yes, water in the middle of a tomb, buried in the desert. It's one thing to find an ancient site with massive megalithic blocks, but what really sets the Osirion apart is its complex hydraulic system, something completely unexpected for the time period, and no one really knows why it's there. The central feature of the Osirion is a stone-paved island surrounded by a channel of water. The water depth hasn't even been fully determined, but researchers know it's at least 10 meters deep. Even more intriguing, the water seems to come from an underground source, possibly linked to a natural spring. But here's the question: why is there a fully functioning hydraulic system in an ancient tomb? Could it have been used for ritual purposes, healing properties, or was it something far more practical, like a water well? Some researchers, including Dorothy Eady, also known as Siti, believed that the waters of the Osirion had healing properties. She even claimed that the waters cured her own ailments, and ancient cultures often attributed mystical significance to natural springs. But here's what's puzzling: there's no clear indication of why this water was important. Ancient Egyptians weren't known for incorporating advanced water management into their tombs, especially ones buried deep in the desert. The fact that the Osirion includes this water system has led to speculation that it wasn't just a tomb, but something more functional, perhaps even part of an underground city or water source used for the surrounding area. Let's talk about the mechanics of this hydraulic system. It's not just that the Osirion has water flowing through it. The design is incredibly sophisticated. The water basin surrounding the central hall is connected to an underground source, and it's replenished at a rate that has baffled archaeologists. Despite multiple efforts to drain the water over the years, the site remains flooded, suggesting that the system was intentionally designed to sustain the water flow. We're talking about a level of engineering that rivals modern construction in terms of precision and sustainability. The concept of water channels and basins was not unheard of in ancient Egypt, but they were generally used for irrigation, not within a subterranean structure like this. Could the Osirion have been part of a larger water management system? Some have speculated that the site might have had a more practical use, perhaps as a reservoir or even an energy source, though this remains unproven. Was the Osirion a healing center? Let's not forget the theory put forward by Dorothy Eady, who believed that the waters of the Osirion had powerful healing properties. According to her, many people, including herself, experienced remarkable recoveries after bathing in or drinking the water. Now, we can't say for sure if this is true, but what we can say is that ancient cultures often attributed spiritual or medicinal significance to water. Could this have been the true purpose of the hydraulic system? Perhaps it wasn't just a tomb, but a site of ritualistic healing, where people came to cleanse themselves spiritually or physically. And here's where things get even more intriguing. Modern seismic technology has revealed that the visible portion of the Osirion is just the tip of the iceberg. There are hollow chambers deep beneath the structure that haven't been fully explored, mainly because of the constant water flow. These chambers could hold more secrets about the site's true purpose, but until we can safely explore them, we're left with only speculation. Could there be an entire network of subterranean rooms connected by water? Was the Osirion part of a larger unknown civilization with advanced knowledge of hydraulics and architecture? We may not have all the answers yet, but one thing's for sure: this site defies what we think we know about ancient Egypt. You thought the Osirion's water system was strange? Hold on, because it's about to get even more mind-blowing. It's not just about water randomly appearing in the middle of the desert. The Osirion's water management system is ridiculously precise, and even today, experts can't figure out exactly how it works. Imagine trying to drain the water, but it just keeps coming back like a never-ending fountain, almost as if the structure was designed to function this way from the very beginning. Here's where it gets even crazier: the depth of the water has never been fully measured. Yep, you heard that right. We're talking about a system that has lasted for thousands of years, where no one can fully explain how deep it goes or where the water is coming from. Researchers have speculated about underground springs, but even that doesn't quite fit the bill. The water keeps flowing, and it's not just a small amount. This is a fully replenishing system that seems to defy explanation. Why would ancient Egyptians build something like this in a tomb? Theories range from its symbolic representation of the underworld to the fact that Osirion functions as a reservoir, potentially used for more practical purposes. While ancient Egypt was known for its irrigation systems, the Osirion's hydraulic system takes things to a whole new level. Modern technology to the rescue? In recent years, archaeologists have used tools like ground-penetrating radar and 3D imaging to try and understand the flow of water beneath the Osirion. These studies have revealed that the visible portion of the Osirion is just the tip of the iceberg. Hidden chambers and tunnels stretch deep beneath the structure, many of them still unexplored because of the constant water flow. Could the Osirion be part of a much larger, more complex network? Some researchers believe that the site is connected to other ancient water systems in Abydos, or even to a broader network of subterranean passages. If true, this would change the way we think about the engineering capabilities of the time. Imagine what else could still be hidden, just waiting to be uncovered. Could it be much older? Now, if you thought the hydraulic system and those massive stone blocks were strange, wait until you hear this. There's a growing theory that the Osirion might be much older than we've been told. While mainstream archaeology dates the Osirion to the reign of Seti I, around 1294 to 1279 BCE, some researchers believe it could predate the pharaoh by thousands of years, possibly pushing the timeline of Egyptian civilization back into the pre-dynastic or even antediluvian, pre-flood era. Here's where it gets really wild. One of the leading voices in this debate is John Anthony West, an independent Egyptologist who suggests that the Osirion might have been built long before Seti I even came into power. West points to evidence of water erosion at the site, suggesting that the Osirion was once exposed to much wetter conditions than we see in Egypt today. His theory ties the structure to a time when Egypt had a drastically different climate, potentially dating it back to the end of the last ice age, around 10,000 BCE. But how does this fit in with what we know about ancient Egypt? Here's the thing: if West's theory is correct, then the Osirion could be much older than the pyramids themselves. Think about that for a second. We're talking about a structure that may have existed before the desert even took over the region. The water erosion found on the stone blocks of the Osirion is similar to what researchers like West have observed on the Sphinx, which has led to a growing belief that both structures could date back to a much earlier, pre-dynastic period in Egyptian history. Floods, silt, and ancient river systems. West isn't alone in his theory. There are geological studies that support the idea that the Osirion may have once been submerged in water for long periods of time. These studies point to the silt and flood deposits found at the site, suggesting that the region experienced heavy rainfall or flooding long before Seti I's reign. If true, this would place the construction of the Osirion in a time when Egypt's landscape was vastly different, with lush vegetation and flowing rivers, a stark contrast to the dry desert we see today. Pre-dynastic or antediluvian construction. Here's the kicker: if the Osirion does date back to a time before dynastic Egypt, then we're looking at a piece of architecture that challenges everything we think we know about ancient civilizations. The precision of the stonework, the advanced hydraulic technology, and the sheer scale of the structure point to a level of sophistication that seems out of place for the era typically attributed to the site. Could it be that the Osirion was built by an advanced, now forgotten civilization, perhaps even one that existed before the pharaohs? Evidence for an ancient legacy. Let's not forget that other megalithic structures around the world, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, have forced historians to rethink the timelines of early human civilization. Could the Osirion be part of a similar legacy? It's not impossible. In fact, some researchers believe that the Osirion may have been discovered by Seti I, rather than built by him. He may have simply repurposed the site for his own funeral complex, leaving behind his cartouches as a way to claim the structure as part of his legacy. The Atlantis connection. And if that's not enough to blow your mind, some fringe theorists even go as far as linking the Osirion to Atlantis. According to these theories, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed thousands of years ago before being lost to time. The Osirion, with its advanced engineering and hydraulic system, could be a remnant of this legendary civilization. While this idea is definitely on the fringe, it's gained a surprising number of followers over the years. A lost chapter in human history. Regardless of whether the Osirion is linked to Atlantis, the notion that it was built by an older, forgotten civilization poses a lot of questions. If true, it would completely rewrite what we know about early human history. Who were these people? How did their knowledge get lost, and why do we see their architectural influence in places as far apart as Egypt and South America? The Flower of Life carvings. Just when you think the Osirion couldn't get more mysterious, something unexpected pops up. Among the giant stone blocks, researchers have discovered geometric symbols etched into the walls, symbols that don't belong to any known Egyptian tradition. These patterns, called the Flower of Life, are formed by overlapping circles, creating an intricate design that has been associated with sacred geometry in cultures around the world. But what is it doing here, in an ancient Egyptian tomb? Here's the twist: these same symbols have been found across the globe, in places like Peru, China, and even India, long before the rise of ancient Egypt. Some theorists believe that this symbol represents universal knowledge, the fundamental patterns of life, or even ancient technologies lost to time. But the burning question remains: why was it carved into the stones of the Osirion? These carvings have sparked debates among historians and researchers, leading some to believe that the Osirion's builders may have had access to knowledge or spiritual insight shared by ancient civilizations worldwide. Could this be proof of a connection between these far-flung cultures? Or are these symbols a later addition, representing the spiritual beliefs of people who came long after the Osirion was constructed? We don't have the answers yet, but one thing is for sure: the appearance of the Flower of Life at the Osirion only deepens the mystery. Were these geometric symbols part of a forgotten chapter in human history, or simply an artistic flourish added much later? That's just one more question in the growing list of mysteries surrounding this incredible site. Who really built the Osirion? Controversy. And the final debate that refuses to die down: who actually built the Osirion? Was it really constructed during the reign of Seti I, or did he simply stumble upon it? The answers aren't clear-cut, and that's what makes this site so intriguing. Mainstream archaeologists believe Seti I built the Osirion as part of his funeral complex around 1294 to 1279 BCE. Why? Mainly because his cartouches were found at the site. This would make it a product of the New Kingdom, like many of the grand temples and tombs we know today. But some researchers aren't so sure. They point to the architectural style, those massive, precisely cut stone blocks, which are more reminiscent of older megalithic structures, like the Valley Temple at Giza. Could it be that Seti found the Osirion and repurposed it? The theory suggests he may have claimed an ancient structure as his own, adding his cartouches to leave his mark. Ready for a twist that feels almost too surreal? Enter Dorothy Eady, a British woman whose life became intertwined with the Osirion in the strangest way possible. Born in the early 20th century, Dorothy Eady believed she was the reincarnation of an ancient Egyptian priestess who had served in the temple of Seti I. Yeah, you heard that right. She claimed to have memories of living in ancient Egypt, and these visions led her to Abydos, where she would spend the rest of her life studying the Osirion. But that's just the beginning. Dorothy, or Seti as she became known, didn't just study the site, she had an almost spiritual connection to it. She believed she had once walked its halls as a priestess of Osiris, and that the Osirion held more secrets than archaeologists realized. Her story added an entirely new layer of intrigue to the site, because unlike most researchers, Dorothy wasn't just interested in the stone blocks and water channels. She believed the Osirion was a sacred place, capable of healing. But it's the waters of the Osirion that fascinated her the most. Dorothy claimed that these waters held special properties, healing properties to be specific. After drinking and bathing in the Osirion's waters, she said she experienced a significant improvement in her health. And she wasn't the only one. Other locals reported similar experiences, though none of this has been scientifically proven. Could it be that the ancient Egyptians knew something we didn't? While many dismissed Dorothy Eady's claims as fantasy, others took her seriously, especially when it came to her intimate knowledge of the Osirion and Abydos. She was instrumental in preserving the site and sparking renewed interest in its mysteries. Her detailed accounts and unconventional theories kept the conversation about the Osirion alive, long after mainstream archaeologists had moved on. And while her theories may seem outlandish, they've kept the Osirian in the spotlight for decades. So was Seti onto something, or was it just a story that made the Osirian even more legendary? That's up to you to decide, but one thing's for sure, her influence on Osirian studies is undeniable, and her legacy continues to attract attention to this day. There's speculation that it could have been built by a much older civilization, one with advanced knowledge of stone cutting and water management. Some even link it to global megalithic sites, suggesting a possible shared knowledge among ancient cultures. While this is more on the fringe side, it raises interesting questions about the origins of the Osirion, and who really had the capability to build something this sophisticated. Either way, the Osirion's true origins remain a mystery, one that keeps both mainstream and alternative researchers coming back for more. Whether or not you believe the Osirian was built by a lost civilization, one thing's for sure, it doesn't fit neatly into the traditional timeline of ancient Egyptian history, and the more we dig into its mysteries, the more it seems to challenge everything we think we know about the past.